What's up, YouTube? We're back with another tier list video. We have just gone through our post-Christmas balance patch. They're back from the winter holidays, and they have taken the kettle down a little tad, and they've also nerfed the trigger grenades. We're going to talk about that in another video, but I wanted to do a refresher tier list because obviously my opinions have slightly changed over time as we played more ArcRaiders, spent more time in PvP, and also just I've seen metas develop, things learned, and you know, I want to talk about maybe what's replacing the kettle as the next, like, quote-unquote macro meta weapon. It might surprise some people, or you might already see it coming. I've amassed every single weapon in the game and tried my best to put all the best attachments on them. Luna will be helping us out today, but let's get into that tier list. We're going to start off with the legendary weapons here. Legendary weapons in this game are more or less arc busters. You can use them in PvP. They're not like terrible in PvP, but they're usually just not worth it because the risk to reward is not always there. I'm mostly just going to be using the Jupiter when I'm bringing in a legendary weapon because I find the Jupiter to be the most proficient at like both PvP and PvE. I can use it in both scenarios. The overpen of the shot, being able to hit weak points while they're still covered by armor, is incredibly useful, very ammo efficient, and if you have a pretty good time with charge up weapons, like if you're pretty good with the timing and aim, it's a very proficient weapon in PvP. For those who don't know, you can actually do, I think it's 65 damage per shot, give or take. And if you hit him in the head, it drops a raider to 30 shield, 30 health on a blue shield, which they're basically in one-shot range when discussing like a game like this, or I think it's a little bit lower than that, but they're essentially like so low that you just need to shoot them anywhere with any other gun or just a little bit of team shot. It can be very effective in PvP. You have to be accurate. You have to be careful. The Aphelion, I don't love in PvP. I think it just ADS is too slow. The damage per shot seems very low. And then it's always awkward with how small the magazine is. You'll take like 3 to 4 shots at a person and you'll have like, you know, 4 left in the magazine or something like that. And then you're like, you know, you're doing some peek shooting at someone and then you're like, well, I only have 4 shots left, which is 2 bursts. I have to reload. And if you guys don't know about energy weapons, when you reload, it's a clip-based weapon. So those 4 shots are essentially wasted. Something I would change to the Aphelion is both. I would like to see the like recoil probably reduced on it, because like I'm going out of my way to make sure I'm reducing the recoil. I'm not putting on the blue attachment, by the way, because the ADS speed on the Aphelion is already so slow. I don't want to reduce that ADS speed any more than it already is, if possible. The equalizer has its own downsides in the sense that it has a severe charge up. Like that's a serious charge up, so you have to be able to be aware of that and like be in a situation where you can actually charge it up beforehand. It does fry if you can hit some really good headshots, because obviously it has that 2x multiplier, but you have to be able to hit it pretty well. Also, something that we learned while using it throughout the game is that it has like around a 250 meter range. It literally has a point where the beam just disappears. We were trying to do some distant queen kills for trials at one point, and we discovered this. Another reason why the Jupiter just ends up being better. It has like infinite range and very little damage fall off. Bit awkward when you're in that situation where you literally can't touch the enemy that you're trying to shoot at because the beam is just disappearing. But, you know, remember, crouch reduces the recoil further for you. Try to hit those headshots. So ranking them really quick. I'm going to be starting off the tier list in a PvP function, and then we'll kind of at the end wrap up with like a PvE like ranking. But Jupiter is like a solid B tier for me, just because I feel as if I can be pretty proficient. It'll sometimes feel like just a worse Osprey, but then you have much better PvE potential. If a Rocketeer gets on you, you actually feel like you can kill it pretty fast, you know, in a clip and a bit, especially if you're overpenning both engines on one side. You can drop them incredibly quickly. Or if you're going the weak point right above the eye, you can like kill them in less than a mag if you manage to hit right above the eye, you know, that little flap that comes up that's basically protecting a weak point, and it goes through and it hits the capacitor at the back. You can do some massive damage to Rocketeers. So for that reason, I think it can be pretty damn proficient in PvP to get those like annoying arc off you. And then also, like I said, if you hit your headshots, people are going to be terrified of you. You're going to be dropping them and using up all their meds. It's really good in those poke battles if you get good with it. The equalizer will be lower. I do think that I was maybe a bit harsh on in my first video, but I still think the charge up time makes it so you have to be very preemptive with your shooting. And then also it's just a little awkward. If you could put like better attachments on it, maybe to reduce recoil and stuff like that, it would actually turn into a literal laser beam. In the current context, it's sometimes just annoying to use. Good against arc, but more for stripping armor rather than just outright DPS. And then the Aphelion, I think it actually still deserves D tier. Even with good attachments and stuff like that, I don't love its vertical recoil. I don't love how long it takes to go back, or like ADS. I don't like how long it takes for the dispersion to recover after ADS. I don't love the fact that the clip is so small. It doesn't seem to be that proficient or as proficient as the other legendary weapons in PvE. Just don't love it. And on top of that, you have to kill the matriarch rather than just killing the queen, or the queen is just an easier big arc to kill in general usually. And I just have way more queen cores just sitting around than matriarchs. So yeah, just another thing that it loses out on. Next, talking about the Stitcher, a fan favorite for many. I see this weapon as probably the most popular overall weapon for close range combat. Some people absolutely love to kit it out, as you see here, putting like $30,000 worth of attachments on it. Very proficient at mid-range when you start investing in it really, really heavily, and it can easily start competing with the Bobcat. There are some cries for it to be nerfed, and I can understand some of it, but I'll be honest, I've been really enjoying this quote-unquote Stitcher meta because it has a clear counter, especially in close range, and it's mostly shotguns. I farm people that have Stitchers, and man, do I make a huge profit in PvP raids when I see Stitchers like this. It makes me giddy when I see a Stitcher in someone's hands and I just two-pump them with the El Toro. There's no doubt the Stitcher is like a very versatile weapon when you invest a ton into it. It can feel really good. I don't disagree. Like I do love the weapon, but I'm not always feeling crazy about it at mid-range. It's a very, very like comfortable weapon to use from like 10 meters to maybe 30-ish meters. But like if you're talking about like 10 or less meters, the El Toro will mop you up. Just people just rolling, and then obviously using the new tech where you can crouch in between shots. I'll show that off in a little bit. I think the Stitcher is still easily like A+ to S, but remember, when we're looking at these weapons, like how proficient are they across the entire spectrum of PvP to PvE? And you're not going to want to use a Stitcher really for PvE. And then on top of that, like you're not really using a Stitcher at like mid-range. I can't recommend that. You're just not going to want to do that. You're going to get absolutely blasted by like a Venator or something like that at like, 50 meters or something like that. You're not going to want to use a Stitcher at 50 meters. It won't work. But there's no doubt the Stitcher works really well in that, 30-ish meter or closer range, but then it can get outclassed in really close range, especially when you have those El Toro gamers with like the blue choke. They start sniping with their shotguns, and they can peek shoot you more effectively. So third-person game, peek shooting, very, very good. But yeah, I'm going to put the Stitcher around A+. I don't think it's as good as people make it out to be, but it's a very reliable weapon and easy to use, which I think is why people tend to want it nerfed or adjusted. But let me know in the comments down below what you guys think. All right, next going to the Rattler. So the Rattler, everybody's favorite weapon to hate on. I don't think it ever deserved as much hate as it did. It was mostly just down to the fact that the Rattler 1 felt so bad, and a lot of people just tended to spray with this weapon. This is definitely more of a mid-range, close-ish range brawler. Like, I'm not going to be trying to engage with people at like Stitcher range. I just won't. I'm going to be aiming for people probably closer to like the 30 to 40 meter range, and then like tap firing more, crouch firing as well. And it does feel good. I have seen quite a few people run it with the kinetic converter, and it starts to actually feel on par with just a normal Tempest at that time. Obviously, the reload is quite slow, but if you use a similar mentality to the Anvil, it's actually not that bad. Just anytime you stop firing, hit the reload button, basically. Just always be like stopping, because like it'll keep your magazine relatively full. A lot of people just forget to do that, but you can keep the magazine topped up, and it can feel kind of bottomless in a way if you can keep that mentality going in your head. Great weapon though, but not an amazing weapon. Another thing is that unfortunately it's quite expensive to get from 3 to 4, or sorry, 2 to 3 and 3 to 4. It uses way too much compared to other great weapons from 2 to 3. I think that's a mistake still. And then 3 to 4 is the exact same price. It just seems weird. I don't know why they've done it that way. Placing it on a tier list, I still think it's at like a B- ish. You know, with the right attachments, I think it can be pretty proficient, but it's not, you know, something I'm going to be like regularly using. And I do see some people do pretty damn well with it, especially if they get the drop on someone and they can hit some headshots. But I'm not going to say like it's one of the better weapons. It does do pretty well in PvE, luckily, because it's medium pen. But yeah, the lower tiers, it does not feel great still with that smaller magazine, and then you obviously don't have the attachments to help it. All right, the Hairpin, everybody's favorite assassin tool. Just a kind of a silly weapon in my opinion. If you have really good aim, I do think it can be cool to use. It's incredibly silent and, you know, very good at like headshot multipliers and stuff like that. But let's be honest, it's not a weapon that I'm going to really recommend that many people use. It also doesn't get that many attachments, only getting the magazine. I think it's more of like just a fun weapon. Like you can just run around like, you know, Solid Snake and stuff like that. You know, I'm not going to put it anything higher than C tier. I think the only reason it's going to not go into D tier is just because it's really cheap and it comes with a suppressor by default. But I'm not really going to recommend you use it by any means. It's not that proficient of a weapon. All right, moving on to the former glory weapon, the Kettle. If you guys didn't see the patch notes, it was dropped from a 600 rounds per minute, which is about 10 clicks per second, to a 450, which is I believe 7.5 clicks per second fire rate. It now is like obtainable by like the average person, more or less. You know, I still think there is like a skill gap in it of like, obviously, like if you have a faster trigger finger, you're going to be able to obtaining it better than someone else. Me, I don't have a particularly fast trigger finger in my age, but lots of people still do. And I still think it's quite good, especially when going for headshots. I do think some people don't value the fact that it actually has a slower fire rate, which actually makes it a little bit better at like mid-ish range, because sometimes people are overfiring and then they're overfiring it too fast and the bloom is growing too much and they might be on target, but the bloom might be too great, so they're actually missing a shot. So the slower fire rate can actually work out in your favor in that regard. Still think it's an extremely powerful weapon. It's just, but like not the obviously meta pick of gray weapon plus faster TTK than like the majority of weapons in the game. It's now more reasonable at like, you know, a good weapon. And for that reason, you know, I still think it deserves to be an A tier, where it used to be probably an S tier, but just because of how cheap it was and how effective it was. I still think it's an S tier weapon. The Kettle, especially when upgraded and put good attachments on it, it can kind of excel at like a wide variety of ranges. It's not going to be as strong in that like 10-ish meter range, but if you're going for headshots, it's still an incredibly fast weapon. And because it's semi-automatic in nature, the accuracy does lend itself a little bit better than the Stitcher if you're going for headshots. For mid-range, especially at tier 4, you can get some really nice bullet velocity upgrades on it. Obviously with Kettle 4, you should always be trying to upgrade it. It's pretty cheap as well, so you can touch people at mid-range, 50 meters or so. And then, you know, even for long range, it's not bad. And if you want to put like an extended barrel on it, I've used it before. It was quite a bit fun, you know. You'd be surprised with a nice tap fire. You can actually do a lot of poke firing at people quite proficiently. You know, it's not no Renegade, but it's not bad. So A tier, probably a little bit behind the Stitcher, just because the Stitcher has a little bit more versatility in the close to mid range. But I really like using the Kettle. It feels still quite good. Going to the Ferro, I feel like the Ferro has lost favor in a lot of people. I remember when the game first came out, the Ferro was easily like the most overpowered free kit weapon, and people were going nuts about how free kits were overpowered and it was always Ferro's fault and stuff like that. But it seems to have swapped as people have like upgraded to blue shields more often. I think as people have gotten better at the game and been more aggressive. Also, Ferro is seen a lot less usage. I do think that the Ferro is still an incredibly good free kit as long as you're not Stellamontis, just because you have the ability to kill Arc pretty proficiently. You can take that, like if you just spawn in, you can take out a Rocketeer with this weapon with the ammo starting. Just hit those engines, you'll knock them out of the sky. You could put an extended barrel on it, and that's probably all I would really do, or a silencer. Don't fall for the bait of the other two attachments. They're not necessary at all. But yeah, Ferro is still like a good weapon. It's just I think we have so much availability and people are finding anvils a lot faster in the game and stuff like that, that I don't think the Ferro is as prolific as it once was in the beginning of the game, which is why I'm going to put it in around B+. I don't want to knock on any like Ferro enjoyers, but you know, finding a Renegade and it just is the better weapon, or using an Anvil, it is the better weapon. Top little tip though, if you have to choose between a Ferro 4 and like a low tier Anvil, the Ferro 4 is actually the better weapon to use because the fire rate of a low tier Anvil is just too slow. But as soon as you start obviously upgrading the Anvil, the Ferro loses its viability. So keep that in mind when you're choosing the two. Like you're looking at a body on the ground, you're like, oh my God, I have a Ferro 4, but they have an Anvil. If it's a low tier Anvil, don't worry about it. Just ignore it, or just keep it and upgrade it later. Okay, going to the Burletta. This is a weapon that I think a lot of people have been sleeping on. The Kettle enjoyers have been so loud about how good the Kettle is. They've been missing out on the Burletta in a way. And I think this is going to be the next weapon that people are going to use because they didn't touch the fire rate on the Burletta. From my testing with my friends, it seems like the fire rate is still 600 rounds per minute and 10 clicks per second. They completely missed that with this latest balance patch. The Burletta, although it doesn't get as many attachments, the attachments that it's missing don't really matter. You don't really need the recoil reduction just because the fire rate is honestly really fast and the recoil is not that high, especially after the first couple shots. It just kind of settles in and you're just getting a lot of bloom at that point. You will probably start to see some people transition from Kettle to Burletta with their macros or fast trigger fingers. The Burletta can be incredibly good with its fire rate. I've already seen some people doing it and they drop you incredibly fast if they hit you with headshots, so be careful of it. And if you're just missing the Kettle and you want that gameplay back, the Burletta's sitting right there. I don't think the Burletta is anything like it was with the Kettle where it's like just instantly S tier, because like with the Kettle you could get it as a free kit and then all of a sudden you had like an S tier loadout right there just because you had a free kit and a Kettle. The Burletta obviously requires some more investment. You do not need to upgrade the Burletta. It's mostly just going to give you a faster reload speed and some more durability, which is pretty cool because you could just pick up a Burletta 1 from like a security locker and you already have this weapon and you don't need the attachments. The compensator does help a lot with the, you know, accuracy, but not as needed, especially if you're in closer ranges. So yeah, Burletta gonna be right up there. It's not gonna be an S tier just because it's not like a free kit or like a gray weapon, but damn is this weapon probably gonna get used a lot until they adjust the fire rate on it. Be careful out there if you see someone holding a Burletta. They might surprise you. All right, going over to a fan favorite of both my own and other people's, the Anvil. Love the Anvil so much. It is just a weapon that I feel like I can use at almost every range in the game, and it's just very proficient against PvP and PvE enemies alike. I feel like I can, you know, use this in close range as like a shotgun peek shooting. I feel like as if I can use this in medium range as a poke weapon. I can even start plinking people at extremely long ranges or taking out arc with it. The weapon feels amazing. It doesn't require much investment to feel good other than try to get it to an Anvil 4 as best you can. Put a silencer. Compensator is not a bad option, or obviously putting the extended barrel as well if you want to be long range poking a little more, but it's usually my PvE / poke weapon, so I'll typically use a silencer for it. Compensator though does work. Your follow-up shot will cover faster and you can get it downrange, which is nice. But yeah, I'm still going to be putting the Anvil in S tier. I still think the Anvil is incredibly good for just a wide variety of situations in the game. It just feels really, really good. The versatility of it is just so high. One last thing, Anvil splitter, not worth it. Just sell it. Just sell it. Doing the math on it, it's just not worth it. It turns your Anvil from being a good close, medium, and long range weapon to being a pretty good to great close range weapon, pretty mediocre mid-range weapon, and then pretty unusable at long range just because of the shot pellet spread. I just don't recommend it. I have seen someone mention that, like, well, why don't you just put it in your safe pocket and then swap it in and out whenever you're going in close range or mid range? That's too much work. Just use your anvil like you normally would. It's far more proficient like that, and you can easily change targets way faster. Just do that and save yourself. Just dismantle that part or sell it. It's much better in that scenario. Going to arguably the best shotgun in the game. A little bit of spoilers for the rest of the video, but the Toro is disgusting. When you put a shotgun choke 3, you put a lightweight stock on it, and it actually pairs ridiculously well with the Anvil that I currently have on. Pull-out time is extremely fast. If you crouch and then roll, you can actually recover from the roll faster and shoot faster, right? So there's like the typical fire rate, right? And then there's the, you know, but then if you crouch, you can fire a little faster. It's just another reason why I feel like the Toro just kind of beats out the Vulcano. Does more damage per shot. The fire rate, obviously, difference goes in the way of the Vulcano, but because of just the game being a third-person game, peak shooting tends to be a deciding factor in so many situations in this game. It's not really close in that regard. Like, the Vulcano, you're going to have to over peak for, and you're going to have to more or less commit to a kill similar to Torrente. Whereas with the Toro, you can kind of get away a lot more with just like peak shooting, and it works really, really well. It's terrifying in close range. I almost want to put it in S tier, but it really does fail pretty hard at like mid-range, but it is so prolific in close range that it makes me want to put it. It's probably going to sit somewhere in like S- to like A+. I do think it is actually legit a better weapon than the Stitcher. I farm Stitchers all day with the Toro. I do. I make so much money off just bringing an Toro with like a green choke, that's it, and killing a Stitcher with like $30,000 worth of attachments on it. It's insane. And it just pairs so well with like weapons that kind of are very versatile in multiple ranges. The Toro is disgusting. It is literally teetering between the two. I'm going to put it in A+ for now, but it could easily be an S-. All right, going to somewhat of a fan favorite. I see like people that love their Arpeggio, love it. They go crazy for this thing. It's a very fun weapon to use, especially if you invest a lot of attachments in it. I don't think it's that good of a weapon, honestly, after trying to use it quite a bit. When you invest a lot of attachments into it, especially kinetic converter, and you upgrade it to Arpeggio 4, the fire rate is crazy. And with a lot of attachments, it can feel good. But would I much rather just have like an Anvil or something like that? Yes, because it can feel like a bit of a pea shooter if you're not hitting headshots. And you're probably not going to be hitting headshots unless you're at like pretty close ranges, at ranges where, like, you know, I'd much rather be using like an Anvil or even at times a Stitcher or, you know, a Venator or something like that. You know, you're investing a lot into this Arpeggio to make it feel good, and that's it. It's good in my opinion. So I'm probably gonna put it somewhere in like B. I do think it is like an upgrade to the Rattler if you upgrade it. You know, fully upgraded Rattler with attachments versus Arpeggio, fully upgraded with attachments. I'm gonna lean more towards the Arpeggio. Yeah, I don't think there's much more to be said about that. We haven't done a tier list with the Venator since they made their changes to the Venator. It was not the biggest change to the Venator, basically just reducing the upgrade fire rate. I think it used to be what, 75% at a Venator 4. Now it's obviously only at 40, but I still think the Venator is probably like my favorite mid-range brawler in the game. You know, it still has that peak shooting potential. It's still incredibly good at like just doing small little pokes, but also being able to be pretty good at like just, you know, scaring people off, or, you know, just like finishing up a kill. Like maybe you started with a Renegade. I think it is still incredibly good in close range just because of the overall accuracy. You can get some very good headshots on people, even in close range. It doesn't take a lot of investment attachment wise. It's very ammo efficient. It just pairs really well with like some very good like mid to long range weapons like the Renegade. I still think as if it's probably an S- tier weapon for just overall PvP. It obviously suffers big time time in like terms of PVE, just because you can't put a silencer on it and it doesn't feel particularly great for taking out like arc in general. It can do like good DPS, but you're going to be extremely loud the entire time. It is a mating call of a weapon. If you start firing this thing, you will have every PvPer on the map hearing you and running at you. But hey, maybe that's something you're looking for. But once again, current theme of just versatility of the Venator, I think keeps it hovering around S tier. Similar to the El Toro, I do think it could drop a little bit lower just because it's probably not as versatile and cheap as the Anvil, and it will get outclassed in certain extremes, like at long range or in short range. There's this like niche middle ground where it really excels, and it excels still quite well in. So I feel like the last time we talked about the Renegade, I didn't give it enough praise as much as I think it deserves, and it's probably a weapon that actually deserves to see some adjustment. And that might be a bit of a hot take for you enjoyers out there, but I think the Renegade is by far my favorite weapon in the game, and I do think it still is a little overtuned. It is so good in medium to long range if you could hit your shots. And it's not that hard to hit your shots when you start like pairing it with like very good stock attachments and like extended barrel and stuff like that. Like if you have a team of Renegade, you can absolutely oppress a team running at you. Like it is like you can't fight back kind of territory just because you have the accuracy of an Osprey, you have more fiery than an Anvil, and you have a massive magazine at the same time. And if you're good at hitting like decent shots in like mid-ish range to close range, I have put myself in some weird situations where it does perform very well in close range too, because you can do a lot of damage to heads. This gun is actually like insane. I wouldn't always put the padded stock, just for reference here. If I'm trying to use it more in mid-range, I would actually put a stable stock 2. And if I'm swapping weapons a lot, I probably wouldn't recommend a stable stock 3. But if you find yourself just running around with the padded stock, or with the Renegade out, padded stock 3, very good. Keeping that dispersion lower in between shots so you can be more accurate more reliably. So I recommend the Renegade. When you upgrade this thing, it is still the weapon that benefits the most in the game, I think, from upgrades, other than obviously the Anvil. But dude, Renegade is insane. It's just so good. I highly recommend it if you have not given it a try. And it is disgusting on a map like Blue Gate or on Spaceport. It's still so insane that I honestly think it probably needs to see some amount of adjustment, because it's a little too prolific at that distance, and it makes other weapons like the Osprey and stuff like that don't feel nearly as good when you can be as accurate as the Osprey with the Renegade and fire 3 times faster or whatever it is. It's insane. It is logically the upgrade to the Anvil, but it doesn't feel as good as the Anvil because the Anvil performs it performs quite a bit better versus like green shields, because you can instantly break their shield with the Anvil, whereas the Renegade, it's a little bit lower damage. But for like blue shields, the Renegade is far superior in that regard. Okay, going to our next one that we were actually kind of just talking about, the Osprey. Okay, so my thing with the Osprey is that it's a first-person weapon in a third-person game. You definitely have to start using it in like a quick scoping method if you are in anywhere in like mid-ish range, because you will get punished very hard by like peeking out, especially in a game like this where it has so much latency. Like I'm sure you've been in a situation where even after the patches they've done to like kind of reduce it, you will get shot behind corners quite a bit. So you definitely have to shoulder peek and go for a little bit of a quick scope to make it feel like you can do something like what the Anvil or Renegade can do, or else they will eat you up. Also, be aware, if you are going to be a sniper camper at the top of a building, it has a pretty aggressive damage fall off compared to other weapons. You're going from 45 damage to about like less than 30 pretty quickly at that like 200-ish meter range. I would probably not recommend like just plinking at someone at 200 plus meters unless you just feel like ruining their day or having them push you very aggressively and maybe take that Osprey from you. It does excel best probably at like 150-ish meters, but anything closer than that and you're going to be in Renegade or Anvil territory of possibly being outpeaked. But you know, you can do some very disgusting things. Quick scoping. So give it a try. I still think it's around a B tier weapon, but you know, I do think you can do some pretty cool things with it. And just like before, like anyone out there is like, why are you missing this? You do not need an underbarrel mod. The amount of Ospreys I take from people and they have underbarrel mod, I don't understand it. I don't get it. I don't get it. And for those wondering, yes, I know the ADS speed of the lightweight stock does not actually work, but you get the swap speed benefit, which is very nice. All right, going to Torrente. Not a weapon that I use very often. Very fun weapon in this game. You'll see it's only level 1 for me, mostly because I don't use it that much. I love using this weapon as more just like a fun slide around a corner stitcher range. But there's a lot of times where I'd rather just use a stitcher just because of that reason alone. The bloom. You can easily get outgunned by people that just go for headshots, while you can't really go for headshots nearly as reliable. It's an easier weapon to use because you can just body shot king people, and if you invest quite a bit in it, it can be quite deadly. You don't have to upgrade it because upgrading it only really reduces the reload speed and increases the magazine size, which is nice, but it's not something that you need to do, which is cool. But it requires a lot of commitment to a kill. Like, you have to slide around a corner and commit to the kill, and you'll probably get downed. And in a 1v1 situation, you will often lose to a stitcher. You will do that, especially if it's a stitcher with some good attachments, or a Bobcat with some good attachments, or a shotgun. You will just straight up lose. But if you can get a crazy flank on a team and you just get behind them, you can lay a ridiculous amount of damage into them that the stitcher just can't do because it doesn't have a big enough magazine. So I still see the point of the Torrente. It's still there, and I still think it's a good weapon, but obviously I think it loses out in some key areas, which is why I think it's a B tier weapon. Okay, next, going into our selection of purple weapons, there's a lot of debate on whether or not they are worth it. Starting off with one of the weapons that I actually think is worth the purple tier upgrade if you are willing to invest in it like you do your stitcher. The Bobcat, by the way, does not need to be a Bobcat 4. It does gain some, you know, nice benefits, but it doesn't need to be a Bobcat 4. I think the Bobcat is absolutely insane at the higher tiers, especially if you're investing. But as soon as you don't invest in it, you're gonna easily see, you know, videos like from Myth that put out that is just like Stitcher 1 versus Bobcat 1. Stitcher is like a better one versus like the medium shield enemies and stuff like that, just because it doesn't have a big enough magazine. I'd probably like to see some changes to purple tier weapons, like maybe they don't have as much burn rate, or when you lose with them or kill someone with them, when they fall on the floor, they immediately take a 30% durability hit. Maybe they only take 15 if they're a purple weapon. Maybe they make them easier to get the blueprints and they make them less expensive to make or easier to repair. I feel as if purple weapons need some way of making them more like easier to just continuously run, because they're very, very, very expensive at the moment to run, and only the richest players are really going to see the benefit of that, which is, you know, fair, and it's something that you want to do in a shadow shooter. But right now, when you have a gray weapon versus a purple weapon, most people are just going to go with the stitcher and put the same attachments they put on their stitcher or on the Bobcat on their stitcher and just use that, because it's like 80% of what the Bobcat is, because statistically the Bobcat is better. It just is. But, you know, when you have a Bobcat that like costs significantly more to obtain and stuff like that, obviously that's where like people start talking about, well, is it good enough? You don't want a runaway freight train of the rich get richer, though. If you make the Bobcat too good, it'll be the inverse, where the richest players will have the biggest advantage versus, you know, poorer players that can only run the stitcher. You do want the stitcher and Bobcat somewhat close in a game like this, because it can easily go into the favor of the richest players, and that would not be good for the average player out there. Trust me, it would not. So instead of like buffing the Bobcat from a like damage perspective or like something like that, maybe like reducing the recoil, durability, or just repair rate, something like that, I think would be a better option for this game. Because I think, you know, if you go too crazy with the Bobcat, it could easily just be like way too dominant and be like the next problem weapon, and only certain people could obtain it. But I will be putting the Stitcher and the Bobcat right next to each other, because I do think they are interchangeable. If you're in the late game, the Bobcat is the better option if you have the money for it. It will win against the Stitcher very reliably with the same attachments, very reliably. But the Stitcher is more obtainable in the early to mid games, so you might be in that camp and you might want to use that more. So keep that in mind. Now, talking about the Vulcano, it's not as close between the Vulcano and the Torrente. My problem with the Vulcano at the moment is more so of like, why would I just use it? Like, I love the fire rate. I love the fire rate. It's very fun to use, but I would much rather use a Torrente in like almost every situation other than like you using the Torrente and the Vulcano one-on-one. Like you go around a corner and there's 3 guys in front of you and you just lay into all 3. But in most scenarios, you're not going to be like that. And the Toro is just cheaper and it just performs better in that 1v1 scenario or peak shooting scenario. But if you're putting yourself in crazy situations where you're constantly like 2v1, the Vulcano has the edge. But I would just rather use the Torrente, or sorry, the El Toro. And then at times I would almost rather use the Torrente over the Vulcano just because I feel a little bit more confident in it. And I don't have to invest as much resources to get the same kind of gameplay between the Torrente and the Vulcano. Because they do perform very similar, like I've been trying to say. And that's why I'm going to put them around the same tier in B+. Okay, going to the weapon that has not seen any changes, but I really hope it does see some changes because I want to love the Tempest. I do really like it, but I don't use it very often. It's fun. It's like your M16 of the game. I've seen some people absolutely fry with this gun. And if used in the right scenarios, it can feel very good, but it's kind of in the territory of the Venator. I would kind of just rather use the Venator in a lot of situations because it's just kind of cheaper and it's a peak shooting weapon, whereas the Tempest, I can't really peak shoot as effectively. A lot of people say, like, obviously you just got to put a stack on it. It's a ball pup, so they can't really do that. But I kind of just want to see them maybe just reduce the recoil at base so you don't have to invest as much and it just turns into more of a laser beam if you're standing still and crouched. Maybe don't touch the damage stats maybe too much. It just kind of feels like an all right weapon at the moment, like just B-ish tier. I do think you can be very good with it and you can do some crazy things, but you know, would I rather use another weapon? Yeah, probably. I've been finding myself just kind of selling or scrapping a lot of the Tempests I've been getting this wipe, using them occasionally, but then just being like, why am I just using a Venator in this situation? You know, I just, if the Tempest was just easier to use with recoil, a little less expensive to run, you know, like not gaining as, like if I kill someone that has a Tempest and it only lost 15 durability, so I can just bring it into the next raid without having to repair it, I'd use the Tempest more often. I really would. But because it's losing 30 durability every single time it drops on the ground, I don't use it very often. I really don't. The Bettina is the most recent purple weapon that has gotten a change. It was mostly got 2 extra rounds. You can see it is 22 rounds on the magazine, and it also got a durability rate change. Fun weapon to use in PvE because it can kind of feel like an equalizer but legendary edition, or not legendary edition. It can sometimes surprise you as far as fryability, hitting some like good, you know, headshots and stuff like that. You know, even especially for the people that are like more tap firing it at like mid range and stuff. But I'm mostly going to be using it in PvE rather than PvP, just because like it feels like more of a PvE weapon. I don't, because it suffers very similar things to the Tempest, but I would rather just use the Tempest just due to fire rate because it's more forgiving. But let me know, maybe you guys are finding more success with it. I'm not seeing very many people use the Bettina, especially now that it's not a quest reward from freaking Flames event. Yeah, I don't know. It feels like still like a B- pick to like a C+. I think if you invest enough in it, it can easily be B-. But if you're just like picking it up and trying it, you're going to be like, why would I use this thing? Like maybe if they just made it better versus like Arc in general, I would probably like value it more, but I think I'm just going to put it mostly in C+. I would rather just use the Tempest in the majority of situations, I believe, at the moment. And then obviously Hullcracker D tier for PvP, but now that we're going to be looking at it more from a PvE perspective, you know, obviously it's going to go all the way up to S tier. I still think it's very good even after the changes and the nerfs. You just have to go for weak points. I would highly recommend going for weak points. A lot of people are still using it like an explosive weapon, and it's just not an explosive weapon as much as it was before, where it was actually like doing damage to multiple parts at the same time. And it seemed like it was over penetrating and hitting weak points below the armor before even breaking the armor. Still really good in PvE. But that being said, now that we're looking at this from a PvE perspective, Jupiter, Equalizer, and Aphelion start to move up the tier list, whereas Venator, you know, probably drops to like a B tier, Renegade to like an A tier. Anvil still sits at an S tier, by the way, because I think it was like 12 shots to break a queen's like armor, and then you can just run out and go loot it. It's an incredibly money-making strategy if you've never done that, or just to make legendary weapons very reliably. You can literally just bring a bunch of anvils and shoot the leg armor, de-aggro the queen, run out, loot it, run to hatch. You make a crazy amount of money doing that. It's very, very effective. Toro will drop to like C tier versus PVE unless you're like extremely close range, but you're obviously not going to get that very often. I do not recommend using the Bobcat in PVE. Burletta's okay. Vulcano can do some serious damage if you get really close because of the damage per second, but you know, you're not going to get that very often. Same goes with the Torrente, so it'll be like A tier-ish. That drops down as well. Osprey can surprise you at like really long range sniping of like Rocketeers. The bullet impact of the Osprey can actually push back a Rocketeer enough that he almost never can touch you if you shoot it fast enough. Fun little tip on that one. Can be a bit funny. When you do that, Ferro obviously goes up, and obviously Bettina goes up as well. So I'd say this is more or less where I'd put a lot of the weapons if we're just looking from a pure PvE perspective. It does shake up things quite a bit. Let me know what you guys think of the tier list in the comments down below. I'd be very curious to see how on par I got with you guys. Really curious about it. I love reading the comments. Or feel free to come by the live streams. I stream almost every day other than Monday mornings over on Twitch or YouTube. Obviously that's the handle right there. And yeah, hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day, morning, evening, afternoon, night. Leave a comment down below, like, comment, subscribe. Peace out, YouTube.